Yes, what? You want me to start?
Yeah, introduce the book, please.
Okay, well, we are going to be reading a book called Sabriel, written by Garth Nix. And I think it'll be interesting to see how we pronounce all the names too, or at least how I pronounce different names.
Yeah, for sure.
Sometimes in my head, I just turn certain letters into other letters.
Yes. Yes.
That's how the names become.
Mm-hmm.
It's about, well, we're going to get into what it's about, but it's a young adult fantasy novel.
Ooh, you're already edging into dangerous
Am
territory.
I? I don't even know. I mean, I have no idea. Is
I
it just
don't
a
know.
regular
Like
fantasy
I've
novel?
seen people call it young adult, and but then I read it and I don't think so. It's
Hmm.
way too dark.
I was thinking about that earlier, but I think for a lot of different kids, it would be just fine. But
Oh, sure, sure. No, it would
I
be.
guess it depends on your. I mean, I could have read this when I was younger for sure.
Well, let's see if it says anything on the. It says EOS, a HarperCollins publisher, Australian science fiction. It is reviewed on the back cover of my edition by Philip Pullman and Lloyd Alexander. Both are young adult authors.
Okay.
But I don't think it says. Hold on, let's look at the copyright page. The Library of Congress catalog and publication data. It just says fantasy.
Okay, I'm looking under the all the copyright information. It says for information address HarperCollins Children's Books, a
Yeah.
division of HarperCollins Publishers.
Well, I wonder if in the beginning they didn't know what to do with him.
Maybe. I mean, it kind of walks the line, in my opinion. I mean, I think it's a super easy read.
Yeah, no, it is.
Anybody
It
can read
is.
this.
It's it's longish.
You read slower than I do, probably, and I
Why is
tend
that?
to
Why
read
is that, Jill?
faster.
Why do you think I read slower than you?
Well, you told me that.
All right. So, Jill, I'm going to introduce you because I
I
mean,
know.
why not?
We went on. We kind of went off there.
We did, but I know you. I've known you for quite a few years,
Yeah.
and we have a lot of television flavor in common, but not exclusively.
No, we have a lot of different tastes. Just
No, of
like,
course,
like
absolutely. But we've played D&D together for a number of years,
yeah.
and it just so happens that you and I both really like Sabriel.
Yeah. Well, you introduced it to me, or you actually suggested it to me.
Yeah, but you
Way
then
back
went
when.
ahead and read it and you liked it. So we
That's
have
true.
that in common. So
Yeah.
you're Jill. You
Yeah.
worked for Sony.
Well, I contract with PlayStation.
Uh-huh. PlayStation. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm ATN. I go by Lul most of the time online just because it's easier to pronounce.
I think it looks weird. Like, I
It's a
don't get it.
palindrome. You don't have to get it. It's a palindrome. All right. So Jill, we are going to be discussing the first six chapters in the prologue of Garth Nix's Sabriel, which came out in 1995. I think it's like his second novel. I don't know exactly. His publishing history is a little bit complicated.
Hmm.
He definitely published The Rag Witch before this.
Is it a short story or is that a
No,
novel?
no, no. It's a full novel. It's good, but it's not even remotely as good as this. I'm just giving us some context for any listeners and for ourselves.
I'm Googling Garth Nix as you speak right now.
Oh, nice. But anyway, this book was originally published in Australia, supposedly by HarperCollins, and I've been doing some research online because I collect books, and I've been trying to find a first edition of this book, and it is unavailable.
Really?
There are lots of copies from 1996 in the United States.
Yeah, that's what I have. I assume that's what you have.
I don't. No, no, no. I mean, I have a paperback,
Oh, actually, mine's. Yeah, oh, so do I.
which I have no idea when it was actually printed.
Hmm.
1996, first American edition. That's bullshit. Well, the first American edition's a hardcover. It wasn't this paperback.
Hmm. Weird.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Anyway, so it's a big mess. The publishing history is a mess. But Garth Nix is famous as a young adult author now, although I would argue that this book it's a little bit more advanced than what he continues to write these days.
Yes, it deals with death. So that's
It does. It does. And it's definitely for more advanced readers than like the Mr. Monday series that he did, which I read the first book of, and it was definitely below my pay grade. As far as I can't enjoy it. It's written for too young of an audience. This, on the other hand, I think is written for late teens, actual young adults, not children, and later. But when I worked at the bookstore, we put this in both places if we had enough copies just to be safe, and it sold well out of both.
As far as Wiki is concerned, not that that means anything. It lists it under his young adult and children's literature.
Does he have any adult literature?
I don't know. There's a list of lots of things, but I can't tell if they're novels or stories.
Yeah.
There's something called The Seventh Tower. And The Keys to the Kingdom.
Yeah, The Keys
a lot
to
of
the Kingdom.
stuff.
Sure.
Since this series, which there are 2 other books, which I have also read. I don't know if you've read them.
Which ones are those?
It's Lyriel. It could be Lyral.
I think it's Lyriel.
And the third one is Abhorsen.
That's true, but guess what? There's actually a 4th one, and
I'm looking right now, and a 6th one.
I have not seen that yet. I don't know if it's forthcoming or what, but there are 2 books that are.
One's called Clariel, and one's called Golden Hand.
Golden Hand is forthcoming, I'm pretty sure. Clariel's out. I have it on my shelf right now. I haven't read it yet.
I have to read that. I have not read that yet.
Okay, so there's also Across the Wall, which collects short stories and a novella that take place in the same Old Kingdom series. And then there's one called To Hold the Bridge, maybe. I don't remember the title exactly, but it is also at least it collects something from the Old Kingdom. So
there's also one other I'm seeing on Wiki called An Extract of the Journal of Idrak, the Lesser Necromancer, another short story. So
interesting.
There's some new stuff, at least for us.
Well, he took a long break from this series after Abhorsen and Across the Wall. Clariel was supposedly forthcoming for years, and then eventually it did come out, but it was, it's kind of like a George Martin problem where, you promise one thing and you deliver another. But we're not here to talk about George Martin.
No.
So I'm responsible.
Garth Nix, though we can. But circling back to Sabriel.
Yeah, circling back to Sabriel. What cover do you have? You have the Dixon cover, right? Or Dylan?
Yes.
Leo and Diane Dillon?
Yes.
I made a roughly square image for the podcast.
That's the cover.
Title and the top portion of that image that they created. It is beautiful. It's just a lovely. They're really, really good. It's unfortunate that he has died. I don't know if she's still doing illustrations on her own, but they were a team. And
when you say a team, do you know how they separated the work?
I do not, but I know that they worked in collaboration on everything that they did, and have done for many years. They were winning awards for their illustrations many, many, many years ago.
I think my one and only note, if I had to give it a note, would be she should be even slightly more pale.
I agree.
It'd be hard to read on the page.
I agree. She should be a little paler. She is just okay. Well, that's a good jumping off point because that happens in the prologue. So our prologue, which is very brief, introduces us to a very pregnant woman who stumbles into a camp of travelers. A midwife assists her in delivering a baby, but during the process, the mother dies, and very shortly thereafter, the baby dies as well. A man arrives, calling himself Abhorsen, and requests that the baby be baptized, regardless of the fact that it's dead. One of the travelers is a charter mage who does indeed baptize the child, and I guess they're sort of taken aback because the baptism shouldn't work on a dead thing, but it does work. And very quickly thereafter, Abhorsen enters into the land of death to retrieve the child. There, a creature, one of the greater dead, is waiting and holding the child away from him like it's poisonous. And Abhorsen has a brief conversation with this creature called Caragor, who he, at one point in time, had bound beyond the seventh gate. And so Sabriel in this world is quite alive, and Caragor is a little sloppy, and she grabs a hold of his substance, and it burns him. He cannot tolerate the touch, so he discards her from his person. Abhorsen grabs her up and retreats back into life with the baby, who is now alive. That's pretty much the happenings in the prologue. Would you agree, Jill?
Yeah. And then we
Okay.
can discuss a few more extra details.
Okay, so the purpose of the prologue obviously was to introduce us to Sabriel, her father, the conditions of her birth, thus her mom being dead. She was born in the Old Kingdom.
Did you say that?
What?
That was his daughter?
Yeah, he says father of Sabriel.
Okay, I didn't know if you said that.
That's like the last. Did I say it?
Yeah, did you say that?
Ooh, I don't know if I did or not. That's a good point that Jill brings up, though.
So at the very end, when he comes back out of death
with the child,
the baby in his arms, so there's a midwife and a charter mage, and he explains to them the situation, basically, that Sabriel is his daughter. We can make our own conclusions as to who the woman is, but he says, I believe that they loved each other very much, something to that effect.
Yes.
And the midwife, agrees to go with him to help, also saying like, you're going to need a wet nurse and all this. He's like, oh, I know. And then the charter mage wants to help, but is reluctant because of his other group, the rest of his group, which I'm taken to assume that they're all charter mages of some description, or they're part of some sort of, they're part of the charter. It seemed like they were all part of the charter.
Which we're going to get to what the charter is pretty quickly, or we're going to try to, but I think it's one of those things that's really hard to nail down.
Yeah.
The last thing I do want to talk about in the prologue was the description of the land of death, because Abhorsen can enter the land of the death just at will.
Yes.
And he describes it as a flat, gray, featureless plain through which a river flows. There are pools, like tide pools, and the flow at the headwaters where you enter, or he enters, is very slow but cold. And as you progress closer and closer to the gate, which is like a mist-shrouded
the first
region. Gate. Well, the first gate is the one that he enters through.
I picture, this is what I was thinking when I was reading this, I picture the first gate. Actually, I don't know if they described the first gate in the prologue.
The second gate, Joe.
Wait for my feelings on how I picture the first gate.
He does leave it a little bit up to interpretation, but he describes it as like mist-shrouded.
And he also says to Caragor, I, who change you beyond the seventh gate. So we know there's at least 7 gates.
Well, yes, we do. And at this point, we only know that there are 7.
I'm looking right now.
But we'll get there.
At least 7 gates.
Yes, we'll get there. The first gate is the boundary between life and death. The second gate is within the land of death wholly.
It also seems incredibly easy for him to do this. It's almost
right. He's a necromancer.
It almost seems instantaneous. There's no you don't see him do a little dance or a chant, or you don't see him do anything. It almost just, it happens.
Yeah.
And he's there.
Right.
It's just interesting.
Which I think it's just that way for all necromancers.
Yeah, sure, maybe. I'm just describing it to our audience.
Right. Anyway, why don't we move on to chapter 1, yeah?
Okay, chapter 1.
This was a good chapter. It's a really good intro chapter.
So, chapter 1, the summary for chapter 1. There is a girl, Sabriel, we soon learn. She is with a bunny who's just been run over. Kind of dreary. We find out Sabriel is a 6th form prefect. She attends Wyverley College, established in 1652 for young ladies of quality. A young girl, Jacinthe, runs up, really distraught about her bunny. And Sabriel, all of a sudden, kind of, I don't remember if she waves her hands, but she whistles and she goes to the dead world and brings the bunny back to life. She almost falling onto the bunny as she comes back from the land of the dead. She scolds Jacinth for being there to kind of cover up what she's done, because I don't think she's done that before and shouldn't really be doing that in front of people. Jacinth runs off, happy her bunny is alive. We learn Sabriel is attending the school, and her father visits twice a year. But as Sabriel has mentioned to Miss Umbrady, I believe, the headmistress, she says that she sees her father more frequently than that. Maybe monthly, it seems like. And Miss Umbrade kind of dismisses that, tries not to think about it. Because the school does teach charter magic for an extra fee and with permission from parents, but not everybody knows about all of that stuff. Sabriel later that day prepares to meet with her father, or later that night, and she does all the preparations. There's a bunch of different things she does, and she waits and waits and waits, and he doesn't come, and that's curious. And as she's waiting, a girl runs in to say that, oh my God, there's a dead creature. She thought there were other girls at the door. She opened the door, and there was this black figure, a dead figure. Or, well, the girl does not say dead, but there's a black figure that runs in. So Sabriel obviously runs to attention, runs to the dormitory, sees the figure, does some magic words and whistling or whatever she does. I think probably some charter symbols or charter magic, and silences and quiets the girls, and slows or also quiets the dead thing. And she goes to the land of the dead, where she hears her father's voice tell her to take the sack as the creature is falling through the gates with the sack. Sabriel retrieves the sack and comes back into the real world, where the magistrix is with her. Magistrix Miss Greenwood, who kind of seems to understand what's going on, because it seems Sabriel kind of clues her in and teaches her some of this necromancy stuff. Miss Greenwood, the magistrix, understands what needs to happen, because Sabriel opens the bag to find her father's sword and his bandolier with his bells, which I don't think we discussed in the prologue. I'm not sure if they were discussed. And that ends chapter 1 with Sabriel knowing that she needs to, the next day, head off to the Old Kingdom to see, hopefully, if her dad is alive or trapped in the land of the dead at the best. And that's chapter 1.
Okay. So of note to me, at least, when
There's a lot of stuff going on in this chapter.
It is,
Let's
but
just start from the
it's a really good chapter. It's a very, very nice introduction to Sabriel as kind of a young woman who really kind of does what she wants to do, right?
Yeah, but she had some hesitation. It seemed like she hadn't done that before. She doesn't seem to do that freely, not in my opinion.
Maybe not, but she's obviously of the opinion that she can kind of handle it herself. She still lives in a world that's a little bit coddled at this point.
Yeah, it's an all-girls school, we
Mhm.
find out.
And
She's a
she's
prefect, so she obviously does well.
Yep, she's
Student. So we find out I believe in this chapter, we find out what her grades were. I didn't mark the page.
her place. She's like second place in this,
yeah,
third.
first in magic, obviously, but she was kind of all over the place, which I found cool.
Yeah, but she's always top 5 or 6, right?
Say that again, Etienne?
She's always top 5 or 6.
Yeah.
She's always good at what she does. However, okay, so when she goes to enter the realm of the dead, she claps and it resonates. And then she whistles a few notes and it puts the girls back to sleep. It's insane. But that introduces to the notion that magic is based around sound.
Sure.
And then when she pulls out the bells, that's just further evidence that the bells, the tones of the bells are used in magic in this world, at least for necromancy.
Well, we don't know that yet.
We know that the bells are used by Abhorsen.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. You can put 2 and 2 together on that, for sure.
Right.
Also, I believe it's mentioned. I'm trying to look right now. I believe it's mentioned. She also does some on the way back into the land of life, which I believe we find that's what it's called, life and death. Um, she also does some like charter magic to heal the bunny, also, like as she's coming back into the world. So she's using a mixture of
Mm-hmm.
necromancy and charter magic,
Right. Well, I think
which again we learn later in this chapter.
yeah, I'm not really sure. Like, charter magic is just difficult. Like, so far, he hasn't really explained it.
No, we'll go into it. We will. Yeah, it's actually pretty interesting, but we'll get into it in a couple.
Right. So let's discuss this little moment when there's a dead thing at the gate, and the girl, Jacinth or whatnot, lets her in. No, it was Jacinth with the rabbit, right? Who's the girl that lets the dead thing into the house or the school?
Oh, I believe I wrote it down. Let me go and see. She goes to Olwyn.
Okay.
Olwyn.
Olwyn
Comes in to tell Sabriel that she thought it was two other girls,
right,
that I guess had gone out or whatever.
They were having a midnight snack or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so this Olwyn accidentally lets a dead thing into the school.
Yeah.
But it turns out that the dead thing that she let in was a messenger. There was that black cord that was leading back to the gate.
Yeah, I probably did not make that clear. Yes, this was a messenger.
Well, it was a dead thing with that cord. So she knew right away that it was controlled by something more powerful.
Yeah.
And it had that sack that it delivered to her.
Yes.
Well, it sort of dropped it when she didn't know who was controlling the dead thing, and she was trying to destroy it or send it back.
Yeah, the messenger like falls into the river of death,
yes, and drops the bag,
which is a river that is just flowing to a point.
Always towards the gates.
Which I visualize it kind of as Pirates of the Caribbean, the first drop. Have you ever been on Pirates of the Caribbean, Etienne?
Jill, of course I have.
Not everybody's been to Disneyland. Or Disney World or Disneyland Paris or whatever.
Oh, no, never been to that one. But yeah, I've been to the other two.
So that's how I visualize how it comes to that point.
Right. Yeah, drop off. Yeah. Well, things make the sound of the gate. There's a sound to the gate like rushing water. And when something passes beyond the gate in either direction, it mutes the sound. So she knows when this thing has passed through the gate in either direction based on the muting.
Water flows faster too when that happens.
It picks up speed as it gets farther and farther. Like closer to the gate, it's more powerful. So anyway, this dead thing, it turns out, was controlled by her father or somebody who's an ally of her father, because it was delivering to Sabriel two very important pieces of equipment for Abhorsen. Yeah. So we don't know what's become of him. She doesn't know what's become of him, but she tells the magistrix or whatnot right away, she's leaving. She's not going to stick around to graduate in 3 weeks. Like, life as she knows it just ended.
Yeah, and the magistrix totally understands and gets it. Another interesting point, in the middle, so she goes into the dead realm, the land of the dead, and halfway through, or before, she kind of scopes out the situation, and then she feels the presence of the magistrix and kind of snaps out of it for a moment.
Right.
To talk to the magistrix, and then it basically says, don't do anything, because the magistrix was getting ready. She could, forming on her tongue symbols that would unleash lightning and flame, the destructive powers of the earth. So the magistrix
she was going to use charter magic.
Yes. So
charter magic must have, the formation of the charter magic must have something to do with symbols. She was forming them on her tongue. So I don't know. It's confusing to me.
Again, we'll get into it later, because it gets described a little bit more later.
All right, so there are a couple of things. We already talked about the whistle and the clap and the bells, which I find fascinating because I come from a D&D background, and magic has got nothing to do with sound, or very, very little. There's the verbal component, but this is very different.
I'm trying to think of anything sound related that's magical, and I'm trying to blank.
What, in D&D?
No, just in anything.
Oh, yeah. See, I don't know. That's why when I read this book originally, I was kind of blown away because I don't know where he got the idea. I don't know if he borrowed it from somebody.
It seems like old magic to me, or old, I don't know, or like Native American. Um, I could see them using sound or like, I don't know. That seems
That's
good.
a good point. He is Australian. It could be Aboriginal in nature, but
Yeah.
that's a question I would just have to ask him if I ever get to meet him. But there are a couple of things that are revealed in this chapter that we haven't discussed yet. One is that there are 9 gates along the river.
That is correct. There are 9 gates.
That's revealed. That's all that is revealed, though, that there are 9 gates.
Yes.
And we're also told that magic, charter magic in particular, works close to the wall, to the Old Kingdom, which is to the north. And the school is what, 40 miles from the wall?
Yes, that is correct. 40 miles.
Magic still works 40 miles from the wall, but it gets more powerful or less powerful the further you get from the wall.
Yeah.
And that pretty much summarizes chapter 1, in my opinion.
Chapter 1. He's off or goes to prepare.
Right. Well, that's leads directly into chapter 2, where we have Sabriel waiting for tourists to dislodge from a bus that she has taken from a nearby village up to the perimeter, which precedes the wall by just a little bit. The perimeter is described as like World War I style trenching with barbed wire, concertina barbed wire everywhere. There's a lot of medieval weaponry on the soldiers up there, and World War I or World War II era. There's a gun emplacement at some point in time, but essentially Sabriel's got her boots, her winter clothes. She's got her skis, her snowshoes, and her big old backpack, and an almanac, which informs her that the weather on the other side of the wall will be snowing, even though on this side of the wall it is not. And sure enough, she said it looks like a razor had separated the sky into 2 different seasons. So Sabriel gets off the bus, and she's just kind of standing there looking at the wall, which is a little bit in the distance still. And this puffed up bureaucrat approaches her and demands her papers. And so she, still being kind of the girl who's never known trial or hardship, starts to try to cast some charter magic no, she does. She actually produces the passport that's been requested of her magically, and the guy doesn't even seem to notice. And then she's starting to cast some more magic to befuddle him, or in other ways play with this guy, who she immediately dislikes this guy. And then all of a sudden, out of the trenches come an entire cadre of people with swords and spears and armor and charter marks on their swords, and an obvious mage. And I mean, she's just immediately surrounded. She's like, oh, well, that's what it means to cast magic this close to the wall. I mean, there are people who are prepared to deal with it. And that's exactly what this is. It's showing you that there's a wall protecting, what's the name of it's like Ancilier. I can't remember the name of the country.
Ancestier.
Ancestier. Yeah, Ancestier. So Ancestier is the country that she is in currently, where Wyverley College for Gifted Girls is, and etc. The wall is a literal wall with crenellations made of stone about 40 feet high that is dividing the Old Kingdom from the country where she now resides. The concertina wire and etc. is there to prevent the tourists from getting across the wall, is how it is described. And anyway, so one of the people who came running out of the trenches when she was trying to cast magic is this man named Hories. And they introduce each other, or they introduce themselves to each other. And it is determined, he looks at her and he knows that she's going to cross the wall. She's able to produce that passport, which is extremely rare. And so he takes her to, the headquarters, as it were, where all of this stuff has to be kind of passed through bureaucracy before she can cross the wall. And during that travel to the headquarters, he tells the story of how he met her father. Abhorsen, how he was sitting he was sitting on the other side of the wall, and they encountered him. And oh geez, it gets so complicated. It's an interesting story, but it's really not that important. I'll let the reader read it for themselves. But essentially, he helps them out by producing these wind whistles to keep the dead in their graves so that the wall doesn't get overrun by the dead, the friendly or enemy. And so let's see. That's pretty much it. That is the entirety of the chapter. They meet, they go to the headquarters, and there's that little show of power there.
Okay, so I want to start off chapter 2 with my word of the read.
Oh, interesting.
Which is just a word that stood out to me that it's maybe a word you've heard before but don't really know what it means, or maybe obviously I've read it before because I've read this book, but the word is bitumen.
Oh, yes.
And it is said 3 to 4 times in this chapter.
Right.
Which I just thought was funny. It's on page 34 and then on page 35.
Right. He's using it to describe the parade grounds.
Well, the definition is a black viscous mixture of hydrocarbons, obtained naturally or as a residue from petroleum distillation used for road surfacing and roofing.
Yeah, so it's tar.
What that looks like. Bitumen, everybody.
Yeah.
But so there's Ancelstier and the Old Kingdom with a wall.
Yep.
I kind of picture the wall as crumbling for some reason.
She said it's in perfect condition.
Is it? Did she?
Yes, it's brand.
Why am I picturing it as crumbling?
Couldn't tell you. It's described as being built yesterday, and all of the stones are covered in moving charter marks. So the wall itself is protected.
The moving charter marks.
Yeah.
I kind of picture it as like computer numbers, like when you see that visualized on a screen.
Sure.
Like numbers just going by, like we're in the computer world.
The lame computer world. No, this is not the computer world. This is a place where if you can't even see charter marks, because I don't think anybody can see them. I think charter mages can see them, and that's it.
Yeah.
Do you remember the map?
Thing.
Do you remember when he talks? Did he talk about the map in this chapter?
No, not yet. Not yet. That's my chapter.
Okay, fair enough.
The next chapter.
So anyway,
but the big thing is technology versus magic, and Celestier versus Old Kingdom. So in Celestier, it's all about technology,
right?
But as the closer you get to the wall in Old Kingdom, technology doesn't work. Like they have their guns, but they kind of don't care about their guns as much as their swords.
They're not reliable, yeah.
They're not reliable. Nothing's reliable. Even the tourist buses are not reliable.
Right. They have to walk from a distance and sometimes push the bus back.
Yeah.
And the entry to get into the headquarters, there's a pull for the bell, and there's also the button for the intercom or whatever, and the button never works.
It's very old school.
Yes, everything is.
Yeah. So that's interesting.
So yeah, they're relying on more medieval weaponry.
Yes. Because
that's what's reliable here. But they have charter marks.
You know what I would have liked to have seen actually in maybe the first chapter? Though, see, the problem with Wyverley is it's so close to the wall. So
miles.
I don't really know what their technology is like because we don't really get explained that.
No, see, that's a little tricky.
Brief thing about technology in Celestier, but we don't really get a feeling of it, which is unfortunate. I kind of wish we got more of a feeling of it.
I'm feeling like it was early 1900s. That's how it feels to me, because the height of their technology is like the automobile that ran over the rabbit.
Sure.
The bus.
So you're saying
them
cars.
to the wall. Sometimes they do have automatic machine guns placed on the wall, but they had that in World War I, World War II. So early 20th century, I'm guessing. Early to mid.
Yeah, that's fine. I just wish maybe we would have gotten a little bit more of that at the school.
Oh, right.
Before she headed off to what is essentially going to be medieval times, or what it seems like it's going to
that
be.
Horrible restaurant.
I haven't been there in years.
There's one more thing that's kind of revealed in this chapter, and that is that all of the bindings of an Abhorsen cease to function once Abhorsen is dead.
Yes, these flutes.
So the flutes that he made to keep the dead from rising and harrying the people on the wall, because it's even their guys. It's the people protecting the wall. When they die, they'll rise again and return to their post as dead things.
Now, for people who are familiar with Game of Thrones, it is very similar as far as people further from the wall don't understand what's going on.
Right. Yeah. They talk about bureaucracy.
They don't get it.
Yeah. They stopped moving the wall. At one point, they were moving the wall periodically.
Yeah.
And they stopped doing that because the bureaucrats don't understand why it's necessary.
Yeah.
Which is when Abhorsen built the wind whistles.
Yeah. It just sounds like they're fighting off dead things coming through all the time.
Right.
That's the vibe I get anyway.
Okay, so I wanted to bring this up because he describes it. Hold on, let me make sure that I'm not jumping chapter. It's next chapter. Never mind. We'll talk about it then. So anyway, Jill, let's move on to chapter 3 because this chapter was really very, very simple and not very long.
I was going to say I'm going to keep the summary incredibly short because everything is more about what they say or what she thinks. So, chapter 3 summary: Sabriel and Horsyth again in my mind. No, Sabriel and Horis.
Yeah.
In my mind, I was like Horis. So chapter 3 summary: Sabriel and Horis. They sit down and talk about what's going on. He asks her how long the bindings will last.
Right.
She thinks back into her past to try to figure it out. She doesn't really know either when he goes beyond the 9th gate after a certain moon phase, or she's just not sure. Then that's the end of my page. Oh, after they sit down and talk for a while about all this, and she thinks about her past, then he reluctantly lets her go after doing a little bit of fathering to her.
Yeah.
And she skis off.
Right.
Past the wall into the Old Kingdom.
Yeah. Because he has a daughter her age.
Yes. So between them sitting down and her skiing away, they just do a lot of talking.
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the big things that she remembers, we can get into the meat of it now, is she remembers the Book of the Dead, which is bound in green leather with silver clasps, etched with charter marks of blinding and binding and closing and imprisonment.
Yes.
And she knows only a trained necromancer can open it, and an uncorrupted charter mage could close it. So, obviously, Abhorsen. And this is also the chapter where he pulls out that map you were talking about, Etienne.
Right.
But it's only, let me see here, it's only 10 miles past the wall, this map, because that's as far as they can get.
Right. Well, those are two different maps. The map that Abhorsen has is the entire Old Kingdom, but only he can see it.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about the map that Horus pulls out to give her a little bit of guidance, because she doesn't have a map. They
really only patrol the 10 miles or so closest, 6 miles closest to the wall.
Yeah, well, past that 10-mile mark, people tend to not come back.
Right.
Either they leave or are killed, presumably.
So I want to bring up the notion that this is... Okay, so the main occurrence in this chapter is Sabriel passes through the gate, correct?
Well, sure, at the very end,
That's the main thing. That's like the big event that happens. Otherwise, it's just talking and character reveal and information reveal.
Yeah, there's some interesting things.
There's a lot of interesting stuff, but my point is that this, to me, is Sabriel. Like, this is the cusp of adulthood for Sabriel. She literally crosses the threshold into adulthood in this chapter.
Yeah, she kind of barely touches upon like losing her father. It's kind of...
She's still hopeful at this point that he's not gone.
Well, that's true. She's kind of hoping he's not dead, or at least that she can save him.
Right.
So, yeah, but she's trying not to dwell on that.
Right.
For sure.
So let's see what else happens in this chapter.
When he pulls out the map, they talk about Cloven Crest, which is, we learned about Charter Stones. It's a Charter Stone.
Right.
But it's cloven in two.
Right.
It used to be called Bairdrin Hill.
Right.
and it had a charter of the village of the same name on it.
Right.
Or at least used to. Horace talks about how does Sabriel, somehow we learned that there just hasn't been a lot of activity. There used to be lots of travelers back and forth.
Right.
From the Old Kingdom to Encelstier.
Right.
In the past 100 years, it's dwindled. In the past 20 years, it's been virtually nothing.
Yes.
But
the Old Kingdom is a kingdom, and it was peopled and villaged and citied, and it was just another place. But
they hear of Horace, I think, they hear of town names and stuff like that, but it's just they don't see a lot of people.
Yeah.
Also, I believe it's this chapter where it's described, I think when she's going up to leave, it's super cloudy and snowy on the Old Kingdom side of the wall, and almost like a knife cutting in the sky.
Right.
It's nice and clear on the Encelstier side.
Crazy, right?
So that's why she's got her skis ready to go.
Right.
To go off skiing. In case anybody wasn't clear, she's going off into the snow, like the dead of winter, into the Old Kingdom.
Yeah, but it's just autumn on her side of the map.
Yeah.
Or her side of the wall. She has that almanac that tells her, which is, if you think about it, that's another way that it's kind of shown that you can predict the future, because the almanac is handwritten.
Yes.
Or it's printed, excuse me, and there are handwritten notes on it, but it's still telling her what the weather will be right now across the wall. So on some level, it's all preordained.
Yeah, there's some sort of magic in that realm happening.
Right. So there's I just want to bring this up really, really quickly, because I have never read the book by William Hope Hodgson called The House on the Borderlands.
Nor have I.
But Nix in this chapter refers to the area closest to the wall as the Borderlands. And it's capitalized. And I suspect, given that I have read another story by John C. Wright that was based on William Hope Hodgson's world, that this is also an influence to Garth Nix for this area, where
the Borderlands, it's called by the Old Kingdom people, by the way, not Encelstier. It
is a dangerous place where the dead rule the world, essentially. But there's plenty of living people, or there were.
Well, and back to the Charter Stones, we also learned that they're erected where free magic flows, and they're often natural doorways.
Right.
To the land of the dead. There's also an important quote here at the top of the page 57. Sabriel says to Horace, does the walker choose the path, or the path the walker?
Right.
And
a conundrum.
She says these words that were the dedication in the front of her almanac, but they're also the very last words, all alone, on the last page of the Book of the Dead.
Right.
And Horace says, I've heard that before, what's it mean? And she's like, I don't know. And he says, it holds power when you say it. And he explains, like, if he said it, it would mean nothing but words. But when she says it, he feels the power of the words.
Right. And that's despite the fact that he's a charter mage.
Right.
So it has something to do with necromancy.
Yeah. And again, back magic. To her voice and sounds, whatever. There's power there. But right. She says that to him, and he feels that.
So it's a little mystery for the future, because I don't even remember the significance of that, or if I caught it.
No, I'm not saying necessarily their significance, but the significance just of what the magic and what other people feel. And also, I think just how you can feel the magic, I think, is significant. Just that you can feel it.
I think that
at least if you're a mage.
He's an adept storyteller. I have a feeling that there's specific significance to that, but he's just being subtle, and he's allowing us to figure it out on our own in a later chapter. But I'm guessing, because I don't remember.
Maybe.
But why don't we move to chapter 4?
Chapter 4. Your chapter.
My chapter. Okay, so Sabriel has been traveling on skis on the side of the road where the snow is the deepest. She's been cooking, booking, moving as fast as she can, really, because she is in a hurry. And she stops for a rest at some point in time to consult her map or to consult her memory. And she sees a hand sticking out of the snow across the road. So she crunches over there on her skis, and she finds a patrolman essentially from the wall who's dead in the snow. She decides to perform a funerary rite for him, and she uses charter magic, which essentially incinerates his body on the spot. And then she remembers that he was wearing dog tags, but the dog tags have been destroyed by the magical fire. So she doesn't even know who he is. She puts his sword into the ground like a cross where the body was, and then she moves on. Let's see. Is there more to this chapter? Hold on. I'm trying to remember. I think she goes all the way to the... Oh, yeah. So she moves on, and she starts to follow the path that she knows she needs to follow to get to the top of the hill where the Charterstone is. And there on a narrow... It's like a bridge that runs parallel to the river that she's trying to follow. So it's like it's basically a stable walkway that's been constructed out of the stone. And there she finds the bodies of, I believe, 7 men. And they had sought solace of running water to protect them from a free magic or dead thing. But the water was so slow, I think she's called it turgid, that it didn't provide any protection, and they all ended up dying. So she moves their bodies off of the bridge for, I don't know why she takes the time, but she does. And then she notices that there's a set of charter marks on a bridge post, I believe. And so she touches the post to read them, and it's a message left by the charter mage that was in that party warning anybody and to send a message to their captain, Horries, that there is a greater dead loose in the land of the living. So some dead thing, very powerful, has made it all the way out through every gate and is now among the living. And that is the end of chapter 4.
Yes. Yeah. A mordicant. A greater dead.
Oh, no, Jill. No.
Yes.
I don't think so.
It has servants, hands, a mordicant. This is Sergeant Garin. Tell Colonel ...
Yeah, I think that I don't think the mordicant is a greater undead. I think that the greater undead has servants and a mordicant.
Okay. We read that differently. Fine.
We did. But I think I'm right.
All
right. So do you have anything you'd like to add or discuss in that chapter? It's pretty simple and quite short.
What I have written down as far as notes are concerned, back to the whole feeling magic thing. She can feel when the bird, she's walking and she sees a bird kind of go, she sees it on the hunt and it kills a thing.
Yes.
She can feel the life escaping whatever she
right.
killed.
I
can also feel the dead people up when she's getting near them.
Right. And I forgot to mention that they had all had their heads removed.
Yes, I have that written down as well.
Yes.
If you behead it, the spirit will return.
Yeah, it's basically a dead thing or a necromancer took the heads off, either to raise them, to use them as servants, or something. Their spirits are trapped now, and something else has control over them.
Yes.
All right.
So she's just on her way.
Yeah, to the top of the hill.
Crest to the Charterstone.
Right. So chapter 5, Jill.
Sabriel continues on her path and reaches the Charterstone. When she gets closer, she can see some dry stuff on the stone, and she realizes what happened at the stone. And what happened was a charter mage was sacrificed on that stone by a necromancer to either gain access to death or help some sort of dead spirit break free into life. She contemplates on whether to call her guide, which is, I guess, a spirit guide that she has to go into death to get, or to camp there for the night. She thinks on it and decides, no, she needs to move on, but she needs her guide. So we'll get more into this later in detail, but she goes through all of the bells. She names all of them and describes them. We can go into that later. But she goes into death and launches a tiny little paper boat into the water with a splotch of her blood on the tip. And she sets it off. It becomes a boat in the water and goes to the gate and beyond. And she can hear that something is coming. Hopefully her guide. That is the chapter 5 summary.
Right. Is it in this chapter that they describe the marks that she put on the ground and stuff to protect herself?
Yeah, they do go into that. So we can discuss that, go into more detail now. So in order to prepare to get her guide, she needs to set up like a rune on the ground.
That's to protect herself while she's there, because she's helpless,
So she's making these marks. But the north mark was pretty weak.
Yeah.
Even though the lines formed,
right.
She decides to press forward into death.
Right. So it's described as a diamond shape with a charter mark at each of the cardinal compass points, but the one closest to the rune, the stone, the broken charter stone, is very weak. That's the north one. But it does form the protection that she seeks, and so she goes ahead and enters death. And then the frost starts to form on her because she becomes extraordinarily cold and stuff. But this chapter definitely also mentioned that the charter stones tell the story of the making of the world. That's how it's described.
Oh, where is it described?
I don't remember. I didn't write it down, like the actual location, but that is how the charter marks and stones are described, which I thought was pretty interesting. It's, short chapter. Once again, they're not long chapters. I'll see if I can find it real quick. What are we on, chapter 5? Oh, there's the description of the charter marks running like quicksilver through the stone, forming and dissolving, only to reform again in a never-ending story that told of the making of the world. It's the top of page 76 in my edition.
I see it. She
had never seen a true charter stone before, but she knew they were supposed to be like the wall.
Yeah, I don't remember what chapter it is now. We're getting towards the end, but I picture it as like a flow.
Yeah, sure.
And she has to I think it's the next chapter where she's like searching for a word. It's like she has to grab these words from the flow.
Interesting.
Anyway, charter magic.
Let's talk about the bells, because that's in this chapter.
Yeah, that's page 80 and 81.
Right.
She starts with Rana, which is the smallest bell, the sleep bringer, sweet low sound that brought silence in its wake. That is Rana, the smallest bell.
All right. Masriel is the second bell, a harsh, rowdy bell. Masriel was the waker, the bell Sabriel should never use, the bell whose sound was a seesaw, throwing the ringer further into death as it brought the listener into life.
Interesting. Kibith the walker, a bell of several sounds, a difficult and contrary bell. It could give freedom of movement to one of the dead or walk them through the next gate. Many a necromancer had stumbled with Kibith and walked where they would not.
Diram, a musical bell of clear and pretty tone. Diram was the voice of the dead Diram was the voice that the dead so often lost, but Diram could also still a tongue that moved too freely.
Then Belgair, another tricksome bell, it sought to ring of its own accord, was the thinking bell, the bell most necromancers scorned to use. It could restore independent thought, memory, and all the patterns of a living person, or it could erase them.
Wow. Saraneth, the deepest, lowest bell, the sound of strength. Saraneth was the binder, the bell that shackled the dead to the wielder's will.
And then the very last bell, the biggest bell, Astarael. How would you pronounce it? Astarael?
Sure.
The sorrowful, whispered Sabriel. It was the banisher, the final bell. Properly rung, it cast everyone who heard it far into death. Everyone, including the ringer.
That sounds risky.
It sounds incredibly risky.
Yeah. Oh, but I mean, if you need to make sure somebody gets there, that's the bell to do it with, I guess.
I guess that is your final thing. Most of these bells, it seems, except for Rana, all of these bells have dual things that they do. Like Rana just brings silence in its wake, it says, where the others kind of have dual meanings. Like you could, Masrael can throw the ringer further into death that one's different. It whirls you further into death while it brings the listener into life.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, like switching places.
Right.
I guess. So those are the bells, and we finally have. That's the only time I think that it talks about what the bells do. Also, so like it's the kind of thing where you might want to refer back to that later because he's not going to necessarily tell you what the bells do ever again.
No, you know by what will happen, but
oh sure,
yeah.
All right, so let's do chapter 6 now. Yeah.
Chapter. Let me just see if there are any other things. Oh, there's an important bit on page 82 at the bottom, having to do with her sword. Unseen by Sabriel, the inscription began again, but parts of it were not the same. I was made for a person to slay those already dead, was what it usually said. Now it continued, the Clare saw me, the wall maker made me, the king quenched me, Abhorsen wields me. So that sounds like extra stuff on the sword that was put there, since she's seen it, maybe?
I think.
But she's definitely never seen the last part of the inscription on the sword before.
I think that's a little bit of that's a very subtle reveal that she is now the Abhorsen.
I agree. Kind of.
I mean, she's wielding the sword. Like it's in her possession along with those bells. She's the acting Abhorsen right now because her father, who was Abhorsen before her, is not around.
Right.
So maybe now she can read the whole thing because of that.
Also, who are the Clare? The Clare saw me. There's a wall maker. Wall maker made me. Yeah. And the king quenched me. What does that mean?
I don't want to talk about this because I know who the Clare are.
I know, but I'm just throwing this stuff out here for anybody who happens to ever listen to this.
Yes.
To think upon.
Yes.
These are something very important in chapter 5. That's all
I really like subtlety.
That need to be talked about.
Sure. And he's good at it. Like he does nice reveal. Like his information is revealed in a really, really pleasing way for me.
But what I'm thinking right now, and I don't even care if this is a spoiler because I don't remember, but I think we can at least, what we were talking about it before, right?
What?
The the Magistrix, Miss Greenwood, she saw into the future.
Right.
And obviously we've got the almanac with some seeing to the future. So I think we can deduce the Clare saw me. Maybe that has something to do with looking into the future, in my opinion.
Like the existence of the sword was predicted by the Clare?
Or whatever. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Or the need for the sword?
Yeah, whatever the case may be.
Right. So anyway, there's another description to the sword. When she first met the people like Horis at the wall, and their weapons were covered in charter marks, but they were very crude.
Yes.
She recognized them as being like those on the sword that she had, but obviously her sword is a crafted, very, very nice item, like a masterwork quality item compared to the crudity wielded by those soldiers.
Definitely. I mean, as we learn later on into this chapter, this seems like a pretty important sword.
Right. Well, it's got an emerald in the pommel. I mean, people don't put emeralds in the pommels of junk, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, let's do chapter 6.
Chapter 6.
Which is your chapter, right?
What? This is your chapter.
I'm evens?
Yeah, I just did this one.
All right, so this chapter is largely about Thralk, a very unlucky dead thing who has a story not that dissimilar to that of Gollum from Tolkien's Lord of the Rings.
Oh.
He didn't know, he didn't really care, he was not special in life, and then somebody threw a spear, maybe he threw a spear, bounced off a rock, it hit him in the throat, and it killed him. And so he ends up in the land of the dead, and there it's revealed to himself anyway that he has this powerful will to live, doesn't want to die. And so for 300 years, he clings in the river to what's left of his being and fights and steals and tricks and kills and betrays his way further and further upstream. He's able to work his way upstream so that he's between the first and second gates. And then somebody sacrificed a charter mage and allowed a greater undead to be freed into the world. And there was a huge amount of confusion and chaos in that event. And Thralk used that moment in time to escape as well. He found a dead body nearby. He took it over. And he's been living in a cave under the stone, the broken charter stone, ever since. So Sabriel, in the meantime, has formed her protective boundary around herself, and she's entered into the land of dead to talk to her guide. I think her guide is like a white ghostly figure, and I believe she believes that it's her mother. And there's some weird rule that you can only summon this guide every so often, like, a few times in 7 years or something like that.
3 times.
3 times in 7 years. Otherwise, there's a price to pay. And she doesn't know what it is. She doesn't want to know what it is. She's only ever done it once before.
A greater price than the blood droplet.
Right. So there's a funny moment. She talks about, she summoned this person who she believes is her mother as a guide before, because when she was at school, she was the oldest of her friends and the first to have her period. And she didn't know what the hell was going on or what to do about it. So she summoned her guide to help guide her through that moment in her childhood, which is very interesting. There's 2 moments right now. So she's used the guide for that, which is kind of an introduction to adulthood by gender standards, right? You became a woman. And then now she's calling her guide again because she's become an adult, as she's taking over as a person. Anyway, so she's talking to her guide, and her guide warns her. Her guide guides her first and foremost, tells her all of the directions that she needs to get to where she's going, to get to the secret house of the person. And then, sort of startled, she tells her she needs to go. She needs to go right now, and she can't stop. She can't tarry. She can't delay. She has to go right now. Don't look back. Run. And so she does. Sabriel, she leaves the realm of the dead just as old Thralk is trying to reach across and put. Okay, so what happened was that north symbol that Sabriel saw was weak but intact. It winked out while she was in the land of the dead. Thralk, meanwhile, finds her immobile. This very powerful young life. This is why I call him unlucky. He sees she's completely unprotected. She's a powerful creature, very young. He wants to eat her and steal her life force so that he can become more vibrant and less dead. So he's reaching out to grab her, to throttle her. And she wakes up and she just puts her sword straight through him, his throat, and kills him. He didn't realize that it was a ruined sword because it was covered in frost. Like he had no idea who she was, because in her hand where she's got the sword, like, it's completely disguised by snow and frost. And her other hand, what was in her other hand, Jill? He thought it was a lump of snow or a snowball or something.
Oh, it was probably a bell.
Yeah, it might have been.
Or the bow? No,
I think it was the bell. No, I think it was the bell. Anyway, this poor unlucky dead thing, and just trying to make his way in life. She puts the sword right through him and sends him back to death. And she dusts herself off. She packs up her stuff and she starts booking it. And it's described as bitterly cold. Even though she's moving constantly, her boots are wet. Every bit of her is like frozen cold. And she can feel that the warning given by her guide is accurate. Something is pursuing her. Something is following her. So the long and short of it is she follows the directions, which were accurate, and she makes it through a gorge. She's rising through the gorge. She finally finds herself at the long cliffs. She crosses the bridge to the long cliffs, and there's no door. There's supposed to be a door, and this thing that's behind her is close, and she sees it. She realizes it's a mordicant, which, hold on, let's talk about the mordicant.
Wait, are you going to finish your summary, or are we just going to jump into this?
You're right.
You're almost done.
Well, that is essentially it. It's left as a cliffhanger. We'll talk about the very end of the chapter.
She opens the door.
She has to ring a bell to find the door. She rings the bell. The door appears. She drops her sword. She throws the door open just in time to get through, and the mordicant is on the door.
His hand is coming through.
Yeah, and that's where we'll leave it, because that's pretty much where he left it. So let's talk really quick.
So one thing I have written down about mordicants is that they can pass at will between life and death.
Right.
So that seems pretty powerful to me.
Yeah. Well, hold on. I have 3 different things written down for the description.
But before the mordicant even comes, there's more important things that happened.
Are there?
Like, yes, when she kills Thralk, he says to her, quote, "Curse you,
Yeah.
I will tell the servants of Caragor, I will be revenged." So that's important.
What a little snitch.
We've heard of Caragor before.
Yeah, Caragor is the greater undead.
The one that tried to take Sabriel.
Yes. Yes. And that was a long time ago, if you think about it. I think she's 18 now?
She's 18, yes.
Yeah, and she was a baby the first time we encountered Caragor. So 18 years ago, old Caragor was between the first and second gates waiting to be released. Somewhere in there, someone sacrificed that charter mage and let him out.
When we'd also learned in that prologue, a portion was the one that bound him beyond the 7th gate.
Right.
And yeah, so I think we can assume from Thralk's words that when this big old shift happened and this flow of dead things to the first gate occurred because of Caragor.
Right. And somebody on this side that let him out.
Yeah.
Somebody sacrificed that charter mage.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Unlucky. All right. So let's talk about... Okay. So yeah, he's going to snitch on her. And he probably does immediately, because the mordicant is on her trail from the moment she leaves the Charterstone.
Yeah, it's almost an immediate thing. It's like, oh, wait a second. I thought she killed that thing. Oh, it's a different thing. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a different thing.
She's just on the run.
Right. And okay, so let's talk about the mordicant, because you get a little bit of information and then a little bit more and then a little bit more until the very end when she encounters the creature. And that's when we really get the description. But let's see. Mordicant. When it's 100 yards away and closing with every blink, with every falling snowflake, flames were spewing from its mouth, and it thrust its pointed head back and howled as it ran.
Yes.
That's one of them. So the thing's kind of on fire. And then on page 104, let's see.
Well, yes, when he thrusts his arm in on page 105, flames boiled from its gray-green flesh like beads of sweat.
Right.
Small plumes of black smoke spiraled from the flames.
Right.
Bringing with them the stench of burning hair. Ugh.
On page 104, it says it howled again and almost flowed up the remaining steps, flames dripping from its mouth, claws, and feet.
Scary.
Yeah, and its footsteps, it leaves flame in its footsteps. So anyway, this is the creature that's been chasing her, and she's dealt with one of them before, but it was many miles from the wall, and it was already extremely weak when she dealt with it. This one This one's at full strength, and she has a moment of clarity. She knows that this one's at full strength, and she realizes that it's going to kill her and it's going to subjugate her spirit.
Yeah.
Like she has no chance against this thing. She knows that.
Yeah.
And so when she finally rings the bell and she finally finds the door and she drops her sword and she dives through the door, reaches back out, grabs the sword, but the arm of the Mordicant is coming through the door. That's where the chapter ends.
Yes.
That's where
Will
it
she
is.
live or will she die?
Well, of course she's gonna live, right? Of course she's gonna. The book is called Sabriel, not Mordicant kills Sabriel and goes on with story.
Yes, but this is a book about life and death and necromancy, so who can say?
So what did you think, Jill? This is your second read, so obviously you liked it enough to read it a second time and discuss it with me on the podcast.
Yeah, well, like I said at the beginning of this, I think it's maybe it sounds bad to say it's an easy read, but it is. It's just, you can, in my opinion, you could read this in a few days if you have the time. You could just read.
Considering, let's see, how long did it take me to read the first? That's 105 pages. 105 pages. That's the first chapter, which is like 1/5 of the book. You could definitely do it in a day if that's all you did.
Yeah, if you just read this, you could read this in a day.
Maybe 7 or 8 hours.
Yeah.
The whole book.
Like I said, you could easily read this in a few days, like just easily, I think.
Yeah.
If you're a reader and you have time to sit for an hour or two.
God, who's got that time?
Well, that's true. I'm sure I don't know if this is on audio.
Oh, yeah, it is. It is. You can definitely get it from the library on audio. I've been looking for the first edition online, and a lot of people have the audiobook available on CD, so I know it's available.
I wonder if it's any good, or if the reader's any good, whoever's reading it.
Couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
I'm still pretty old-fashioned. I like to read my own books.
Yeah.
I don't like the... No, there's nothing to dislike. I have no dislike for audiobooks. It's just a matter of I would prefer to read, in my time. I don't go into my car and commute, to work every day for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So for those people, I think it makes more sense to listen to podcasts and to listen to books on tape. But I need to concentrate on a book or I don't recall it. My comprehension's really bad if I'm not paying attention.
No, that makes total sense.
So driving at the same time as listening to a book is not really productive for me.
For me, it wouldn't be either. I can do podcasts while I'm driving, but I do kind of prefer to just listen to music because it's more of a zoning out thing.
Yep. No, I get it. I get it.
Yeah, no, I like Sabriel.
I love this book.
There's just something about it, and we'll get into it. Like, this is just a taste of the magic.
Oh no, this is just beginning. That's 6 chapters that could have been the prologue. Any other novelist would have made that 6 chapters the prologue.
Well, yeah, it could easily be just 1 chapter, and that's the prologue.
If it had been George Martin, that would have been the first prologue.
Yeah.
If it had been Stephen Erickson, that would have been a prologue.
Yeah.
100-page long. Great intro to the character. I am a man, so I don't necessarily want to read about young girls as main characters. Just by nature, right? And it's like, I want to read about characters that I can, what do you call it?
Isn't that lucky for you?
Hold on. I don't know. Is it?
Well, I don't know. Is it? I would assume it'd be pretty easy.
I don't know what you mean by that, but
find characters that you relate to.
Yeah, thank you. That's it right there. Like I like to read stories about relatable characters, and I never really expected to.
Does gender have to be a relatable thing, though? It's not really about gender as much as...
In this case, it's definitely not. Like, they talk about menstruation, but it's done on a level that's not...
It's done on a very male level, yes. Very, very surface level.
Yeah, exactly. But
it doesn't have to be anything more than that. There's no reason to go into menstruation. That's not what this book is about.
Right. No, I agree.
About her journey.
You can almost replace her with a male character in a way.
Well, yeah.
She could be a young boy.
For getting a boner in his sleep or something.
Mom, why do I get a boner?
I don't know, something like that.
That's hilarious, Jill.
You tell me. You're the dude.
I am the dude.
I assume. I've never seen it,
Oh, that's so
but
funny.
I guess it could be there.
Well, regardless, like on my initial reading, I'm trying to remember who recommended this book to me. It might have been Jeremiah's wife. I know she's read it, and I think she turned me on to it. And I know that her taste in fiction is quite good. At least we agree on a lot. So I know I read it for that. And despite it being a female main character, I had never once had a problem with it. Never once was pulled out of the story because of it. Like, to me, it's just a fantastic story about a young woman.
Well, yeah, again, it's not about why am I a woman or blah, blah, blah. It's just a character on a journey. Girl things can come up or whatever, but that's not the purpose. That's not the theme of the book, you know?
No, it's not the theme. You're right. You're right.
So, yeah, her being a woman, who cares?
Well,
Yeah, anybody can read this.
I mean, some people will care. Some people will not pick this up because it's about a little girl.
Again, I say anyone who thinks that is foolish,
Yes.
and that's fine. If they want to look at a cover and just see a woman on it and not read it, then they're stupid. So,
all right, let's talk about the cover really quick, though. Let's return to the subject of the cover, because Leo and Diane Dillon, that did the art, they did a spectacular job. And let's see, you see Sabriel, her hair is blown in the wind. You see Karagor behind her. You assume it's Karagor, at least, with his clawed hand and his
it could be, yeah, it could be any dead thing, really.
Yeah, but the main bad guy in this book is Karagor.
Well, so we think so far.
I think so. I mean, as memory serves, you can see her sword in her hand. You can see the veins in her hand, which is amazing. And that the bells all hanging from the bandolier, and the face on the belt is insane. It's just so good. Like, everything about that illustration is beautiful. She's wearing chainmail. I think it's a baldric that she's wearing over the chainmail. And she's got the littlest bell in her hand, and she's just about to ring it. Wait, what does the littlest bell do again? Page 80.
The sleep bringer. It silences. Just gonna shut some dead thing up, man.
Huh. Well, I don't know. Well, Jill, that pretty much wraps it up, unless you've got anything you want to add, overarching stuff about the first 6 chapters.
Nothing that I can really think of. I think we pretty much covered everything. Charter magic,
charter stones, charter symbols. Basically, I am eager to finish reading this book, but I'm going to restrain myself and only read 100 pages at a time in preparation for doing this podcast.
I'm going to too. Maybe we should look real quick and see what we want to.
So yeah, when are we going to do the next one, Jill?
Whenever.
Do you want to do them a month apart?
That long?
All right. So thank you, everybody, for joining myself and Jill in this first episode of Sabriel, where we covered chapters 1 through 6. Join us again in about 2 weeks' time, when we will be discussing chapters 7 through 12. So it's about another 100 pages of the novel. If you want to read along and join us, please do so. We'd be happy to have you. And yeah, do you have anything to add, Jill?
No, come listen to us again.
All right, fantastic. Agreed completely. Thank you for joining.
Bye, everyone.
Good night. We'll see you in the next one.